My full name is George Arthur William Hutton, and I'm known in lacrosse as William Bill Hutton. Bill is my nickname, I guess. March 26, 1942. Born in Collingwood, Ontario. Currently I live in a place called Combermere, which is east of Algonquin Park, between Bancroft and Barry's Bay. I lived in Ajax all the years involved in lacrosse. I only moved up to Combermere last year. Well, interesting story is I came home from work one day and there was a flyer in the door. My son was 5 years old and it was recruiting people to come out and play lacrosse. And I said, well, that's a good Canadian game. And now, understand, my father wouldn't let me play lacrosse. I lived in Long Branch. He wouldn't let me play lacrosse. He said it was too rough a sport. But when my son was 5 years old, I said, well, I'll put him in it. So I took him to the arena, and they had the kids all out on the floor, and I'm sitting up in the stands. And I was approached by an individual, and he said, would you mind helping out with the team? I said, oh yeah, I would go to every practice anyway, so I'm sure, I don't mind helping out. Well, I went to the teams were formed, and I went to my first practice with the team, and I says, well, where's the coach? Oh, we don't have a coach, so you're gonna have to coach too. So I was coach and manager. Okay, and I says, well, that's great. I said, do we have a rule book? Oh, we can get you one of those. And I said, well, what about, is there instructions or anything like to guide me? No, we don't have anything like that. And I said, oh, okay. So I ended up watching other coaches, how they were doing it, and that's how I started. And we didn't have anybody to play with, so I approached Whitby, Gerard Road, and Oshawa, and we formed what they call the Durham League, which really was house league, but the four communities got together. Now, that was working together to provide an environment of play, and that was a good thing. Now, the OLA, I remember Frank Huntley said to me one day, he says, it'd be nice, he said, when Ajax gets back into the OLA, or OMLA, I should say. And I says, well, we never really left. It's just that we needed a place for our kids to play. And the parents were not going to Huntsville during the week to play a game at 7:30. You know, like a 5-year-old child, you don't take them that far during the week. So I said, that's why we formed the league. There was no place for them to play. And John Turney approached me about going on the board for the OMLA. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I thought about it, talked over with my wife, Barbara, and she's been a very strong supporter. John Turney said, okay, we'll on the board. Well, I was president of Ajax Lacrosse at that time because I'd gone from coaching because I didn't like what they were doing and moved into the executive thing after being equipment manager as well at one point, which was a terrible job. So that's how I ended up on the OMLA board. So I get to the OMLA board and I'm sitting around and I'm listening to what's going on, and I was actually appalled. It was so political. And it was just like a free-for-all with everybody with their own personal agendas, no agenda for the province. And I said, that's not right. And so I was Dan Siles. He was from Windsor, but he was from Mississauga. Approached me he says, why don't you run for presidency? And I said, oh, I don't know whether I want to do that. And the vice president of the OMLA at that time was Cy Young, okay? And Cy was supposed to be the next president. Well, Cy, there was something happened at a board meeting, it was very political, and Cy was behind it, and it was going to end up designed to make one team a provincial champion. So I said, that's not right. So I'm going to do something about it. That's always been my attitude. I don't like it, do something about it. And so I did. So I ran for presidency, became president of the OMLA, and with all the visions of what we could do, and I was faced with the same thing at my board meetings of what was going on. So at that point, I got support from executive members and to decide to revamp the OMLA and go from the Super League concept, which everybody was paying attention to the zone concept. And the zone concept was based on the principle that to reduce the travel, but also communities within an area would work together to build lacrosse. Okay, leave the competition on the floor, but work together, pool your resources, pool your ideas, and hold your clinics together. And that was the zone concept. So that was a big step. And the following convention, I presented to the membership, and they agreed and voted in. There were some people opposed to it, you know, because they felt it was going to take away from some of the elite teams. Yeah. But you need a strong base in order to grow. So we did that. Then we went through a phase. Ontario government was after '78, on the success of the field team, and there was some interest of lacrosse. But the provincial government was very concerned about whether they would continue to support lacrosse going forward. And they didn't know whether the lacrosse met their criteria, political criteria, for carrying on. So we went through a planning session in terms of combining the OMLA and the OLA. So we went through a planning session up in Aurelia, and when that was over, we just put together a plan to amalgamate the two organizations. The first year we presented to the board, our board approved it, went to the AGM, and Bill Walker was president of the OLA. They were presenting, supposed to present on the affirmative on the other side. And halfway through my presentation, I got told, you have to go into the other room. They're going to turn it down. So I went in there and I spoke, and they still turned it down. I went back in, and I convinced the membership that we would still proceed, okay? Because we were all the same family, some just older, all one family. That was the idea. So I sold to them, so we had agreed to it. The following year, the membership from the OLA agreed to it, and I became the new president of the OLA. And then we started restructuring the OLA to be more inclusive of other aspects of the sport, like the field, women's field, men's field, where before it was strictly a box organization. Actually, it was a league organization. So we made that change, and that took a little bit of time and some work. Joan Gosling was a real hero for me at that time in helping rewrite the Constitution and amalgamating the parts together. So that was huge. And then, and so that happened, and then I guess that was for a couple of years. And then, of course, World 86 was coming forward, and I was asked to, Boyd Merriger asked me if I would chair World 86, because I was going to be past president of the OLA. And I agreed to, and that was another experience. We laid out the plans. They were good plans. We hired a professional marketing company. And, but then what happened was the CLA had gone through a bit of an uproar. Matter of fact, the year before, when I was president of the OLA, I had put forward a non-confidence motion because of what had happened at the CLA with Bernie Burns using a corporate credit card to fuel up an Air Canada jet for a pro team to go travel down into the States, and they were in financial trouble, and there was some financial discrepancies that had showed up, and I'd had it as a non-confidence motion, and the whole board had to resign, and they put a new board in. Peter Avender from BC, who was with BC at the time, I guess he was president, agreed he would sit as interim president during the transition. But I made a presentation in for World 86, a report in World 86. And the whole problem we had was that this Peter Avender and his group were willing to support the team, but they weren't willing to support the event, which is really a strange thing to take. And of course, if they wouldn't support it, then the Sport Canada would not put any of their money into it, and that affected sponsorships. But we were very fortunate. We had a young fellow at that time, full of vinegar, that said he would step forward, he would take over when the other company, Chris Lang and Associates, dropped the ball, said they couldn't do anything, it did nothing, and he took over and worked hard on getting sponsorships. As a matter of fact, the two of us went up to Ottawa and met with Otto Jelnik in order to try to obtain funding. And we were fortunate we got funding from the minister himself for the banquet. And that's what the money was for. That's best of my recollection. But that's my recollection. So that was a very trying time. Okay, the event was very successful in terms of participation and the crowds, and the lacrosse community were behind it. You know, the zones, the teams were there, and so it was very successful that way. It was not the financial success we would hoped it would be, but in the end, we settled the debts that were outstanding, and we moved on. But the memory is still there, and the game was shown on television in the U.S. and in Australia, and that was probably the first time that ever happened. And again, you know, Jim Calder arranged that. It was through his workings that this happened, and that was huge. That's a huge thing to get that type of exposure. You know, if we were a startup company, we would probably spend dollars in order to attain that type of exposure. So that was the after the '86, and after my meeting up in Ottawa with the CLA board at their semi-annual meeting, when I had to do a report on where we were at, the government had hired a consultant to, in actual fact, to look after the CLA, okay? And he approached me at that time, and he said, the Sport Canada want to pull the plug on the CLA. In other words, they no longer would support them. And I says, well, they can't do that. It's Canada's national sport. And he says, yes. He says, but he says that's what they're going to do. There's some things have gone on. They are in deep debt. There's money they have to pay back to the government. And the only way that we will not pull the plug is if you agree to form a transition team to restart, okay? So I looked at him and I thought, okay, so what we're looking at here is basically that the CLA was bankrupt financially and morally, okay? And I said, okay, we'll do it. So I formed a transition team, and we worked at revamping the constitution of the CLA, again to make it more inclusive, okay? Because my idea is accommodation. You include, you don't make it, it's not just for certain people, it's for people that want to play the game, period. So we had a place for field, and had a place for box, had interlacrosse, had women's field. So we brought all that in, and that's where it came into playing as being part of the structure. But this team, we worked together. We had several meetings, of course, all funded by the government, and we put together the plan, the transition plan, and presented it to the CLA members, okay, at the annual general meeting out in Calgary, and they agreed to it, and I was elected as chairman of the board. Peter Avender was still there as president, but I had been told by Sport Canada that he had to go. Okay, I mean, you talk about political interference. That was it. He had to go. There were some things that had happened that that they weren't very comfortable with. Well, I said, well, I can't do anything, if duly elected. I very much believe in the democratic process, but Peter found out he was not going to have the power that he thought he was going to have, so he resigned, okay? I accepted his resignation immediately, and we resolved the problem, okay? That was a cold cut, and we moved on from there, okay? And then Phil Morgan sat on the board at that time. He headed up the administration or the management side of the game. He spent time doing that, and then finally he backed off. Matter of fact, funny little story, he went over to Czechoslovakia, okay, to promote the game. And they had asked for somebody over there to show them the rules of the game. So he went over there, and he tells a story. He was standing at the bridge when the Russian tanks came over the bridge. So he said he was scared, but that was his story coming back. But he was a great guy. I was sorry to see him leave. So for 13 years, I sat on as chair of the board, and
CLA board.
The CLA board. Yeah, 13 years, chair of the CLA board. And one of the other things we did was we created a seat on the board for First Nations representative. Okay, the idea again was to be inclusive, and the wording of the representation was one part of it. That it was fine to bring in a representative, but we also had to accommodate, okay, because there was a group of people, Akwesasne, that they exist as a territory, partly in Ontario, partly in New York, partly in Quebec, and they wanted to participate, okay? So we just, easy enough, I did the wording out because they transcended the borders and they were an entity, okay? They could become a player in the CLA. Okay, so their teams would have a place to play. And they had the same structure as the provinces did. Now, and what they did with that structure was up to them, okay? Because there's always self-determination, should always be a goal of any structure. Structures are really designed primarily as an environment for growth, an environment for stimulation, okay? That's what they're for. They're not a solid, locked-in thing. They are something that's flexible, that grows as the needs of the people grow. And democratic principle is critical, okay? They should be allowed within the principles of the organization to do their own thing and get self-governed, self-determined. And that was the principle. Yes, yes, we did. We ordered the President's Cups to Akwesasne. I guess that was just a year or 2 years after that. And there was some concerns raised about, well, how do we know that things will be at the same level as other provinces have held and all that type of thing? And I said, well, don't worry about it. I will go down there, okay? And I'm not running the event, but I will go down there and I'll make sure that everything is okay. And I did, and it was a great event, okay? It was a big party. The tent set up outside on Turtle Island. I don't know whether you've ever been to Turtle Island, but if you've never been to Turtle Island, you should visit Turtle Island, okay? And you had a taste of the culture, and we were very welcome there. And there was a funny thing happened, and Mike Mitchell told me that my wife's name is Barbara, okay? And somebody said that the president was there, okay? And his wife Barbara. So Mike Mitchell said they thought it was Barbara Bush. So, and he laughed about that, but it's a funny little story, but it's very interesting because it's true. But we were treated extremely well. We stayed in Cornwall, but it was a big event with the tents and the barbecues so it was more traditional First Nations traditional type gathering. So it was very good. It was very gratifying. And Mike Mitchell's daughter gave me a little lacrosse ball that she hand painted and everything. I still kept it to this day. I was interviewed by Sport Canada at one point for the job. And I had mentioned that one of the things that objectives, long-term objective, would be for the CLA to be financially independent, and instead of being dependent just on government money. Because when you're Ian Scott, Attorney General for Ontario, told me that any organization that receives money from the government, okay, will do what the government says, okay? And I said to him, I says, well, I thought government worked for the people, but you're telling me that people work for the government. He kicked me out of his office. but that was, so anyways, so I went, so that was one of my objectives, was to get off how we would do that, okay? And another one, of course, we had Toronto was putting a bid in for the Olympics, and we were going to be in there as a sport, and I says I wanted to work on that group when it happened. That was, my long-term goals, and the foundation was there as well. So we started the process of forming the Lacrosse Foundation, okay? And the idea of the foundation was a body that would sole purpose was supply funding to the lacrosse community through the CLA, okay? And that's what, it wasn't an autonomous body, but it was part of the structure, but they were the caretakers for the future. And at that time I put out a little brochure with the Hall of Fame, the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, that they were keepers of the past. We were the CLA were today, but the foundation was tomorrow, okay? And that was the job, was to look after tomorrow, to make sure that at some point there was funding to carry on the game and expand the game of lacrosse. That was the sole justification. We formed the foundation, and we had some success. Some donations came in, and the Jim Bishop Award. Okay, when Jim Bishop died, we started the Jim Bishop Award, and we ordered out the First Nations. And I picked First Nations art because I wanted again to go back to the roots of the game. So we had First Nations artists compete and supply prints that we sold. And they did very well for the first 5-6 years, but you could only have so much wall space for prints. And the same people were buying them. I think I have 6 or 7 of them at home right now, but no place to put them, okay? So that's always a problem, because they're fairly large prints. But again, they're records of lacrosse, and very happy that we did that, because that's what we're trying to do, is promote the artistry of the First Nations, and we accomplished that, okay? And the foundation, then I was, at that point, after 13 years, I was really between pressures at work, personal life work, I was reaching the point where I was running into burnout, okay? And burnout, you recognize, is when you get up in the morning and you want to go back to bed. You're not looking with enthusiasm of what's coming, okay? And I said, okay, it's time for me to back off. We need new blood. And that's when Jim Burke stepped in, said he would run for chair, and he did. And I, at that point, stepped back into the foundation. And then when Jim was finished as president of the CLA, he stepped in as president of the foundation. And the foundation was getting some funds at that time, because it started getting funds because of the Trafalgar project. And that's the basis, that's where the money is at this point. So I'd hate to see the foundation not continue, because their job is to protect the legacy, not spend everything in 1 year, support the growth, support the athlete, because we are athlete-based. That's what it is. But it's more than just you can't just feed the top. If you only feed the top, the bottom dies. So you need to feed the bottom, okay? Like a gardener, you put a little bit of manure on the soil so you have the tree grows, and then you harvest off the top. And the top are the elite players, and they go up to the top. So that's the whole theory. So the foundation is paramount to the future of lacrosse, because it has a fund right now that is growing, and that will continue to feed the lacrosse community for many, many years. I always say, that can't happen. I'm not going to let it happen. Okay, I'm a doer. Okay, I see something, I say we've got to do that. It's the right thing to do. Take the high ground and do it. You put your time into it, and my wife supported me. I got to say this again, because without her support, it wouldn't have happened. Because I spent a lot of time away from home, traveling. I used to tie in my business trips to service lacrosse as well. So I tied the two in together, which helped the CLA in their finances, and allowed me to get out into the lacrosse community more. So if I went to Calgary, that I would meet with people in Calgary. If it was in Saskatchewan, you know, and so I guess that what it is you see a need, you want to get it done, and you said, I can do it, I'm going to do it, and that's it. It's kind of a determination. I'm a little bit pig-headed sometimes, and I guess that's part of that.
Bill Hutton was president of the Canadian Lacrosse Association for 13 years. He oversaw many important moments during a time of recovery for the sport. One of the most historical moments that happened under Hutton's watch was the establishment through an Act of Parliament, Bill C-212, to recognize lacrosse as Canada's national summer sport in 1994. MP Don Black, wife of Legends interviewee Peter Black, put forth the motion that led to this seminal event.
I think what needs to be done is people can't forget that they need grassroots in order to grow. Okay, they have to have that. You have to start a strong base. But at the same token, you also need the level up here to shoot for, because that's what people want. People are competitive. Lacrosse players are highly skilled athletes, okay? But they need a goal. They want to go to the next championship. The good players. Okay, so from this base, you develop these good players, and a lot of them give back to the game. But that's what they need to do. You know, if you want to look at some successful sports, basketball is a good example. They're giving back to the game all the time. The elite athlete, they're not looking for what they can take out of the game. They get lots out of the game, but they give back. And that's what I expect to see. The heroes of lacrosse that we have, and who have given to the game, we can't forget about them, the lessons that they learn, the lessons that they're teaching. And I'm talking about, you know, the Don Barrys, the Bobby Allens, you know, these guys, like, they're important to the game, and we can't forget about them. And that's why I'm so happy that you're doing what you're doing, because then these are the people that you can talk about, okay? But at one point, and I understand it is coming about, the game will be more international, okay? If we had unlimited funds, I would say we would donate sticks to countries around the world, okay, in order for them to get involved. Now, some of them have had some experience because of the international interlacrosse. I don't know where it exists today, but that was the French-speaking nations. They had interlacrosse, which was a non-contact form of lacrosse, skill-orientated. And that played a big part in introducing it. But you know, that is always fine. Interlacrosse is a great thing to do in the gym, great thing to do in the field for the young, but they want more. Athletes always want more. They want the next step. They want the next skill level. They want the next championship. So the Olympics still should be an objective, and I understand it is. And I'm looking forward that I will be around one day to see that happen. You know, I see it on Twitter, okay, that things are moving. And actually the Pro League is part of that as well, because it stimulates growth. And we have to recognize that, but it's a separate entity in itself. And they're there for a different purpose than the organizations at the grassroots and even at the junior leagues. There's another little story I want to tell you about one of the shocks I had when I was president of the OLA. We had a problem with a team folding, okay? And the team was Scarborough. So I'm at the meeting, okay, with a major meeting, and I'm saying it's important that you think about yourselves as a league and that you need other teams to compete with. We have a team that's folding, they need assistance. I think St. Catharines, Johnny Meridian had a team at the same time, and Johnny was in the same boat. And around the table, nothing happened, and said, it's fine, we will not be participating. As soon as they said that, the team started vying for their players. As soon as that happened, I said, well, that tells you what the problem is. There's the problem, okay? It's what's in it for me only, okay? And me being a single team. And so what happens? You end up with one team that's going to play with itself? You know, like, it's a league that's important.
Can we quote you on that?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there was one other thing. We had problems with the Minto and Man Cup. And the problem that we had with the Minto Man Cup is that the teams would go to the championship and say, now what rules we're going to play by? And I remember the one meeting, and Sohan Gill, was there. And first thing he said was, well, what rules are going to play by? And I looked at everybody and I says, no, understand, we're going to play by this is a Man Cup. It's a CLA championship. You're going to play by CLA rules. And if you don't want to play by CL rules, you can play for the Dixie Cup. And they played by CLA rules. Well, I convened the Minto and Man Cup for the next, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, to make sure that they played by CLA rules. Okay, and that was as a convener. So I did that as well. I almost forgot about that stint, but I was satisfied with that. I've got other stories like that I could tell. I just don't remember them all.